Nathan Cole never imagined that accepting a simple dinner invitation from his boss would lead to this moment, standing in a stranger's dining room, being introduced as someone's boyfriend when they'd never even kissed. The candlelight flickered across Lauren Blake's hopeful face as her parents studied him with measuring eyes, and Nathan felt the weight of a lie he never agreed to tell pressing down on his chest. Then came the question that would change everything. "So Nathan, tell us about your family." His daughter's face flashed through his mind, the little girl waiting for him at home with the babysitter, the reason he worked 2 jobs, the truth he was suddenly terrified to reveal. Before we dive into Nathan's story, I want to invite you to join me on this journey. If this opening grabbed your attention, please hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now, let's find out what happens when one honest man gets caught in a web of expectations he never saw coming. The fluorescent lights of Richardson and Associates hummed their usual Tuesday afternoon tune as Nathan Cole sat at his desk, reviewing the quarterly projections for the 3rd time that week. Numbers had always made sense to him: clean, predictable, honest. Unlike people, numbers didn't change their story halfway through a conversation. "Nathan, do you have a minute?" He looked up to find Lauren Blake standing at the edge of his cubicle, her tailored navy suit crisp despite the late hour. As the director of operations, Lauren commanded respect without demanding it, and Nathan had always appreciated her straightforward management style. In the 18 months he'd worked at Richardson and Associates, their interactions had been professional, cordial, and mercifully uncomplicated. "Of course," Nathan said, setting down his pen. "What can I help you with?" Lauren glanced around the office, noting the thinning crowd as employees packed up for the evening. "Not here. Walk with me?" They fell into step together, heading toward the break room. The coffee maker gurgled in the corner, filling the air with the bitter scent of the day's last pot burning on the warmer. Lauren poured herself a cup, despite the late hour, then turned to face him. "I have a favor to ask," she began, wrapping both hands around the mug. "And I want you to know you can absolutely say no." Nathan felt his shoulders tense. In his experience, people only prefaced requests that way when they expected resistance. "Okay." "My parents are in town this week. They flew in from Connecticut unexpectedly. My father has some business meetings downtown." She paused, studying the coffee in her cup. "They want to have dinner with me tomorrow night, and I was hoping you might join us." Of all the requests Nathan had braced himself for, overtime, weekend work, covering for a colleague, this one blindsided him completely. "Dinner? With your parents?" "I know it's awkward," Lauren said quickly. "We barely know each other outside of work, but my mother has been relentless lately about my personal life, and if I show up alone to another family dinner, I'm going to spend 3 hours being reminded that I'm 34 and unmarried." She met his eyes. "You seem like someone who wouldn't make the evening more complicated than it needs to be. No pressure, no expectations, just a buffer between me and the Spanish Inquisition." Nathan considered this. He thought of Sophie, his 6-year-old daughter, safely enrolled in her after-school program until 6 every evening. Mrs. Chen from downstairs usually watched her when Nathan worked late, and she'd mentioned just last week that she was happy to help whenever he needed. One dinner wouldn't disrupt their routine too much. "What time?" he asked. Relief flooded Lauren's features. 7 o'clock. I'll text you the address." "And Nathan, thank you, really." As she walked away, Nathan returned to his desk and pulled out his phone. He typed a quick message to Mrs. Chen, asking about her availability for the following evening. Her response came within minutes. "Of course, dear. Sophie and I will have a wonderful time. You deserve an evening out." An evening out? Nathan couldn't remember the last time he'd gone anywhere that wasn't the grocery store or Sophie's school. The thought felt foreign, almost uncomfortable. His life had narrowed to manageable dimensions over the past 3 years. Work, Sophie, home, repeat. It was safe that way. Predictable. That night, after putting Sophie to bed, Nathan stood in front of his closet and confronted the reality of his wardrobe. Work shirts, weekend t-shirts, and exactly one suit that he'd worn to his brother's wedding 2 years ago. He pulled out the suit, checking for moth holes and hoping the pants still fit. "Who are you getting all fancy for, Daddy?" Sophie's voice came from behind him. He turned to find her standing in the doorway in her unicorn pajamas, her dark curls escaping from the ponytail he'd attempted earlier. She had her mother's eyes, warm brown and perpetually curious. "I thought you were asleep, sweetheart. I heard you moving around." She padded into the room and climbed onto his bed, watching him with those knowing eyes that seemed far too perceptive for 6 years old. "Are you going somewhere?" "Just a work dinner tomorrow night. Mrs. Chen is going to stay with you." Sophie's face brightened. "Is Mrs. Chen making her noodles?" "I'm sure if you ask nicely, she will." Nathan hung the suit back up and sat down beside his daughter. "But you need to be good for her, okay? Homework first, then dinner, then 1 story before bed." 2 stories, Sophie countered. 1.5. She considered this with exaggerated seriousness, then stuck out her hand. "Deal." They shook on it, and Nathan carried her back to bed, tucking the covers around her small frame. As he turned off her light, Sophie's voice stopped him. "Daddy?" "Yes, sweetheart? You look happy. About the dinner." Nathan paused, surprised by the observation. "I'm not unhappy about it." "That's almost the same thing," Sophie said wisely, then rolled over and closed her eyes. Walking back to his own room, Nathan wondered when his daughter had become so perceptive. He also wondered when not unhappy had become his baseline for measuring life experiences. The next evening, Nathan stood outside the address Lauren had texted him, double-checking the numbers against the elegant brick building before him. The restaurant occupied the ground floor of what appeared to be a renovated warehouse in the city's recently gentrified arts district. Through the large windows, he could see exposed brick walls, Edison bulbs hanging from industrial fixtures, and white tablecloths that probably cost more than his weekly grocery budget. His phone buzzed. "I'm running 10 minutes late. Go ahead and tell the host you're with the Blake party." Nathan took a breath and pushed through the door. The host, a young woman with severe bangs and an efficient smile, checked her reservation book. "Mr. Blake and his wife are already seated," she said. "Right this way." The words hit him like cold water. Mr. Blake and his wife already seated. This wasn't a restaurant reservation. This was dinner at someone's home. Nathan followed the host through the restaurant and out a side door that led to a private stairwell. They climbed 2 flights, and suddenly Nathan understood. The restaurant occupied the building's ground floor, but the upper levels had been converted into luxury apartments. Lauren had sent him to her parents' residence. The host knocked on apartment 3B, and the door opened to reveal a woman in her early 60s wearing an emerald silk blouse and perfectly styled silver hair. Her smile was warm but assessing. "You must be Nathan," she said. "I'm Patricia Blake, Lauren's mother. Please, come in." Nathan stepped into an apartment that looked like it had been photographed for an interior design magazine. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. Abstract art hung on exposed brick walls. A dining table was set for 4, candles already lit, wine glasses catching the soft light. "Thank you for having me, Mrs. Blake," Nathan managed. "Oh, please, call me Patricia." She took his jacket. "Richard is just finishing a call in the study. Can I get you something to drink? We have an excellent Malbec breathing, or I can make you a cocktail." "Water would be great, thank you." As Patricia disappeared into the kitchen, Nathan stood awkwardly in the living room, trying to reconcile this setting with what he'd expected. Lauren had made it sound like a casual dinner at a restaurant, a buffer between her and parental pressure. This felt significantly more formal, more intimate. "So you're the young man who's been keeping our daughter occupied." Nathan turned to find Richard Blake extending his hand. He was tall, silver-haired like his wife, with the kind of handshake that came from decades of closing business deals. His smile was polite but didn't quite reach his eyes. "Nathan Cole, sir. I work with Lauren at Richardson and Associates." "Yes, she mentioned you're in the accounting department." Richard's tone made it sound like a neutral observation, but Nathan caught the subtle emphasis. "Not accounting, the accounting department. Junior staff, someone replaceable." "That's right. I've been there about 18 months. And before that?" Nathan had expected small talk, not an interview. "I worked for a smaller firm, Jensen and Parker, over in Riverside." "I'm not familiar with them." "They mostly handle small business accounts. Nothing major." Patricia returned with Nathan's water and a glass of red wine for herself. "Richard, don't interrogate the poor man before Lauren even arrives. Nathan, please sit. Make yourself comfortable." The apartment door opened, and Lauren rushed in, slightly breathless, her cheeks flushed from the cold. "I'm so sorry I'm late. The meeting ran over, and then traffic was—" She stopped, taking in the scene. Her eyes met Nathan's, and something flickered across her face. Surprise? Concern? "We've been getting to know Nathan," Patricia said smoothly. "He's been very patient with us." Lauren crossed to Nathan, and before he could process what was happening, she leaned in and kissed his cheek. Her hand found his, fingers intertwining with a familiarity that didn't exist between them. "I'm glad you made it," she said, squeezing his hand. Nathan's mind reeled. The kiss, the hand-holding, her parents' knowing smiles. This wasn't about being a buffer at a restaurant dinner. This was something else entirely. "Shall we sit?" Richard gestured to the dining table. "Patricia has outdone herself with the meal." As they took their seats, Nathan found himself positioned across from Richard, with Lauren beside him and Patricia at the head of the table. Lauren's hand remained on his knee under the table, a silent plea he was only beginning to understand. Patricia brought out the first course, a delicate butternut squash soup with candied pecans. The conversation started safely enough. The weather, Richard's business in the city, Lauren's recent promotion to director of operations. "We're so proud of her," Patricia said, beaming at her daughter. "She's worked incredibly hard to get where she is." "She has," Nathan agreed, grateful for solid ground. "Everyone at the firm respects her judgment." "And what about you, Nathan?" Richard asked, tasting his soup. "What are your career ambitions?" "I enjoy what I do. Numbers make sense to me. I like finding the story they tell about a company's health." "But you don't want to stay in accounting forever, surely?" Nathan set down his spoon carefully. "I hadn't really thought about it in those terms. I'm good at what I do, and the position provides stability." "Stability?" Richard repeated the word as if it were mildly distasteful. "That's important, certainly. But ambition drives innovation, growth." "Richard," Patricia interjected gently, "not everyone measures success by constant advancement." "Of course not," Richard said. "I'm simply curious about the young man dating our daughter." The word hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. Nathan felt Lauren's hand tighten on his knee. He looked at her, questions flooding his mind, but her expression was pleading. "Please, just go with it." "I think," Nathan said slowly, choosing his words with care, "that success means different things at different stages of life. Right now, my priority is building a foundation." "A foundation for what?" Richard pressed. "For the future. For the people who depend on me." Patricia leaned forward with interest. "Do you have family in the city, Nathan?" And there it was. The question that would unravel everything, or force him deeper into whatever story Lauren had constructed. He thought of Sophie, probably finishing her homework with Mrs. Chen right now, her small face scrunched in concentration. He thought of the truth, messy, complicated, beautiful. Lauren's fingers dug into his knee, a silent desperation. "I do," Nathan said. "A daughter, Sophie. She's 6. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Patricia's smile froze in place. Richard set down his wine glass with deliberate care. Lauren's hand went slack against his leg. "A daughter," Patricia repeated, her voice carefully neutral. "How lovely. And her mother?" "Not in the picture," Nathan said. The standard answer he'd given 100 times, the one that shut down follow-up questions without inviting pity. But these weren't standard people asking standard questions. These were Lauren's parents, and Nathan had just revealed that the man their daughter had been secretly dating, except they weren't actually dating, was a single father. "That must be challenging," Richard said, "raising a child alone while maintaining a career." "It has its moments," Nathan admitted. "But Sophie is the best thing that ever happened to me. Everything else is just logistics." Lauren found her voice. "Nathan is being modest. He's an incredible father. You should see how Sophie lights up when she talks about him." Patricia's eyes sharpened. "You've met his daughter?" "Several times," Lauren said, the lie smooth and confident. "She's an amazing little girl." Nathan fought to keep his expression neutral. Lauren had never met Sophie, had never even seen a picture of her. Whatever story she'd told her parents, she was now weaving him into it in real time, and he was running out of ways to play along without feeling like a fraud. That's quite serious, Richard observed. Meeting each other's families. We wanted to be sure before making any introductions, Lauren said. No point in confusing a 6-year-old if things weren't going to work out. And things are working out? Patricia's question was directed at Nathan. He looked at Lauren, really looked at her, saw the desperation in her eyes, the silent apology, the plea for him to stay in this charade just a little longer. He thought about walking out, about ending this absurd situation before it spiraled further out of control. But he also thought about Monday morning at the office, about the professional relationship they'd built, about the fact that Lauren had never been anything but fair and decent to him. We're taking it one day at a time, Nathan said carefully. Getting to know each other, seeing where it goes. Patricia seemed to relax slightly. That's very sensible, especially with a child involved. You want to be certain before making any commitments. Dinner continued through 3 more courses. The conversation ebbed and flowed around safer topics. The city's new development projects, Patricia's work with a local art museum, Richard's business expansion into the Midwest. But underneath every pleasant exchange, Nathan felt the weight of unspoken questions. Between the main course and dessert, Richard excused himself to take a call. Patricia disappeared into the kitchen, leaving Nathan and Lauren alone at the table for the first time since he'd arrived. "I am so sorry," Lauren whispered urgently. "I didn't think they'd assume we were dating. I just told them I was seeing someone, and they filled in all the blanks themselves, and then it snowballed, and I didn't know how to walk it back without disappointing them again." "You should have told me," Nathan said quietly, "before I walked into this." "I know. I panicked. I thought if I just had one dinner where they met someone I worked with, someone stable and normal, it would buy me 6 months of peace." She covered her face with her hands. "This is a disaster." "Your dad definitely thinks so." Lauren looked up. "What?" "He's been assessing me all night. Single father, mid-level accounting position, no clear ambition. I'm not exactly what parents dream about for their daughter." "That's not," Lauren started, then stopped. "Okay, my father can be judgmental, but he doesn't know you. Once he sees what kind of person you really are. Lauren, he's never going to see that because we're not actually dating." Nathan kept his voice low but firm. "This can't continue." "I know, you're right." She took a shaky breath. "After dinner, I'll tell them the truth. I'll explain that I panicked and dragged you into my mess, and they'll blame you for lying, and the whole evening will have been for nothing," Nathan finished. Patricia returned with a chocolate torte that looked like it belonged in a patisserie window. Richard followed, slipping his phone into his pocket. "Sorry about that," Richard said. "Business emergency. Never truly stops, does it?" "That's what happens when you build something from the ground up," Patricia said proudly. Richard started his first company with $5,000 and a dream. Now Blake Industries has offices in 12 states. Nathan felt the implicit comparison. Richard had built an empire. Nathan had built a stable life for his daughter. One was impressive. The other was merely adequate. As they ate dessert, Richard's questions became more pointed. "Nathan, where did you go to school?" "State University. I finished my degree while working full-time." "Impressive dedication. What did you study?" "Accounting and finance." "And you graduated when?" Nathan did the math, knowing where this was heading. 7 years ago. "So you're, what, 30? 31? 32. Richard nodded slowly, and Nathan could see him calculating. Degree at 25, single father at 32, still in a junior position. Not the trajectory of someone destined for greatness. "Richard," Patricia said with a warning note in her voice. "I'm simply getting to know the man dating our daughter," Richard said mildly. "I think that's reasonable." "You're interrogating him," Lauren said. "There's a difference. Is it interrogating to ask about someone's background, their plans, their ability to provide stability?" Richard turned to Nathan. "You mentioned building a foundation earlier. What does that foundation look like? Are you planning to stay in accounting, move into management? What are your 5-year goals?" Nathan set down his fork. The questions weren't unfair exactly. They were the questions any father might ask, but underneath them was an assumption that rankled, that Nathan's worth could be measured in job titles and career trajectory. "My 5-year goal," Nathan said evenly, "is to make sure my daughter feels loved, supported, and safe every single day." That when she looks back on her childhood, she remembers a father who showed up, who kept his promises, who chose her first. That's admirable, Richard said. But what about providing for her future, college funds, opportunities, experiences that expand her worldview? I provide what I can. We live within our means. Sophie has what she needs. But does she have what she deserves? The question landed like a slap. Lauren pushed back from the table. Dad, that's enough. I'm simply pointing out that good intentions don't pay for private school or piano lessons or summer camps. I'm asking if Nathan has thought about how to give his daughter, and potentially a wife, the kind of life they deserve. Nathan stood, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. With respect, Mr. Blake, I think about it every single day. I think about it when I'm working late to make sure there's money for Sophie's field trips. I think about it when I'm packing her lunch at 6 in the morning. I think about it when I'm helping her with homework instead of watching television, when I'm reading her bedtime stories instead of going out with friends. His voice remained calm, but intensity crept into every word. You're right that I don't have a corner office or a portfolio of investments. I don't have a business card that impresses people at parties. What I have is a 6-year-old girl who knows that when she calls for me in the middle of the night, I'll be there. Who knows that when I promise something, I keep my word. That's the foundation I'm building. Not financial, but foundational nonetheless. The silence that followed was deafening. Patricia looked like she might cry. Richard's expression was unreadable. Lauren stared at Nathan with something like awe. I think, Nathan said quietly, I should go. Thank you for dinner, Mrs. Blake. It was delicious. He moved toward the door, but Lauren caught his arm. Nathan, wait. It's fine, he said. Really, but I think you need to have a conversation with your parents, and I shouldn't be here for that. Let me walk you out. In the hallway outside the apartment, Lauren leaned against the wall and closed her eyes. I am so sorry. I never should have put you in that position. Your dad isn't wrong to ask those questions, Nathan said. If we were actually dating, if I was actually going to be part of your life, he'd have every right to want to know if I could provide for you. But that's not his business. I can provide for myself. I don't need someone to take care of me financially. Maybe not. But parents worry. It's what they do. Nathan thought of Sophie, imagined her at 34 bringing someone home to meet him. I'd probably ask the same questions if our positions were reversed. Lauren looked at him with curiosity. Would you be that concerned about money and status? Nathan considered this. I'd want to know if the person loved her, if they treated her with respect, if they showed up when things got hard instead of running. He paused. But yeah, I'd probably also want to know if they could help give her a good life. That doesn't make your dad a villain. Then why does it feel so awful? Because he's judging you through me. Because my limitations reflect on your choices, in his eyes. They stood in the hallway, the muffled sounds of the city drifting up from below. Finally, Lauren spoke. I need to tell them the truth about us not actually dating. Probably, Nathan agreed. They're going to be so disappointed. In you, or in themselves for assuming? Lauren smiled weakly. Both, probably. My mother has been planning my wedding since I was 12. Every time I come home single, I can see the guest list getting shorter in her mind. Nathan pulled out his phone to call a car. For what it's worth, you don't need a boyfriend to be complete. You're doing pretty well on your own. Tell that to my father. I think I just did. The car arrived within minutes. As Nathan climbed in, Lauren leaned through the window. See you Monday? She asked, a question in her voice. See you Monday. During the drive home, Nathan's phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Chen. Sophie is asleep. Noodles were a big hit. Hope your dinner went well. Nathan looked out at the city sliding past, the lights blurring together. He thought about Richard Blake's questions, about foundations and futures, and what it meant to provide for the people you loved. He thought about Sophie, asleep in her bed, trusting that he'd come home. When he arrived at his apartment building, Mrs. Chen was waiting in his living room with her knitting. How was she? Nathan asked. Perfect, as always. We did homework, ate dinner, played 2 rounds of Go Fish, and she was asleep by 8:30. Mrs. Chen gathered her things. How was your evening? Nathan considered how to answer that. Educational, he finally said. After Mrs. Chen left, Nathan checked on Sophie. She was sprawled across her bed, one arm hanging off the side, her favorite stuffed elephant tucked under her chin. He gently moved her back to the center of the mattress and pulled the covers up. In the kitchen, he found a drawing Sophie had left on the table. Two stick figures, one tall, one small, holding hands under a rainbow. In careful first-grade letters, she'd written, "Me and Daddy." Nathan sat down at the table, the drawing in his hands, and felt the weight of the evening finally settle on his shoulders. Richard Blake wasn't entirely wrong. Nathan's life was small by most measures. His apartment was modest, his job was stable but not prestigious. His savings account was healthy but not impressive. But Sophie knew she was loved. She knew she was safe. She knew that when the world felt big and scary, she could come home to someone who would hold her until the fear passed. That had to count for something. His phone buzzed again. A text from Lauren. "Told them everything. They feel terrible, my father especially. He wants to apologize." Nathan typed back, "No apology necessary. He was protecting his daughter. He was being a snob," Lauren replied. "There's a difference. Maybe a little of both," Nathan wrote. Then, after a pause, "Are you okay?" "Better than expected." "Relieved, actually. My mother cried, but in a good way. Said she's been so worried about me being alone that she forgot to ask if I'm happy. Turns out I am. Who knew?" Nathan smiled at his phone. "Glad something good came from tonight. More than you know. Thank you for not walking out sooner, and thank you for what you said to my father. He needed to hear it." "Just the truth," Nathan wrote. "Yeah," Lauren responded, "but not everyone is brave enough to say it out loud." Nathan set his phone down and looked around his small kitchen. Tomorrow he'd wake up at 6 to make Sophie breakfast. He'd pack her lunch with the crusts cut off her sandwich the way she liked. He'd drop her at school, go to work, review spreadsheets, and pick her up at 6:15. They'd have dinner together. She'd tell him about her day, and he'd help her sound out words in her reading homework. It was a small life, a routine life, a life built on showing up day after day, keeping promises, being present. Richard Blake might never understand it. Patricia Blake might pity it. But Sophie would remember it. And in the end, that was all that mattered. As Nathan stood to turn off the kitchen light, his phone buzzed one more time. Monday morning, 9 a.m., my office. "There's something I want to discuss with you. Work-related. I promise." Nathan smiled, typed, "See you then," and headed to bed, wondering what Monday would bring. Monday morning arrived with the kind of gray drizzle that made the city look like a watercolor painting left out in the rain. Nathan dropped Sophie at school, watching through the car window as she splashed through puddles with deliberate joy, her yellow rain boots sending up arcs of water. She turned at the entrance to wave, and he waved back, waiting until she disappeared inside before pulling away from the curb. The weekend had passed in its usual rhythm. Groceries, laundry, a trip to the park where Sophie had made friends with a golden retriever, and its patient owner. They'd avoided the topic of Friday night entirely, though Sophie had asked once why he'd worn his nice suit. Nathan had simply said it was a work dinner, and she'd accepted that without question, more interested in showing him the new dance she'd learned in gym class. Now, driving through Monday morning traffic, Nathan felt the weight of the upcoming meeting settling in his chest. Lauren's text had been deliberately vague. Work-related could mean anything: a new project, a team restructuring, or possibly a conversation about maintaining professional boundaries after the disaster of Friday night. Richardson and Associates occupied 3 floors of a glass-fronted building in the financial district. Nathan badged through security, nodded to colleagues in the elevator, and made his way to his desk. The accounting department occupied an open floor plan punctuated by glass-walled offices along the perimeter. Lauren's office sat in the corner, offering a view of the city that probably cost more in rent than Nathan's entire apartment. At 8:55, he gathered his coffee and a notepad and headed toward her office. Through the glass walls, he could see Lauren on the phone, gesturing with one hand while typing with the other. She caught sight of him and held up one finger. 5 more minutes. Nathan waited in the hallway, watching the Monday morning chaos unfold around him. The marketing team was already in crisis mode over something, their voices rising and falling in urgent waves. 2 junior associates hurried past with armloads of files, looking like they hadn't slept. This was the machinery of business, the constant motion that kept companies alive and relevant. Lauren's office door opened. "Nathan, come in," Sorry about that. Vendor issue that couldn't wait. He stepped inside and she closed the door behind him. The gesture felt significant, creating a bubble of privacy in the glass fishbowl of the office. Have a seat, Lauren said, settling into her chair. She looked tired, Nathan noticed. Not physically exhausted, but emotionally worn, like someone who'd spent a weekend processing difficult conversations. How are you doing? He asked. After Friday. Lauren laughed, a short sound without much humor. I've had better weekends. My mother called me 4 times. My father sent me an actual handwritten letter, which he apparently composed on the flight back to Connecticut. She pulled a cream-colored envelope from her desk drawer. Would you like to hear it? Only if you want to share it. She opened the envelope, unfolding expensive stationery covered in neat handwriting. I'll spare you the opening pleasantries. Here's the relevant part. Your mother and I have had considerable time to reflect on Friday's dinner. While our concerns about your future remain valid, our approach was inappropriate. Mr. Cole demonstrated dignity and integrity when confronted with questions that, upon reflection, were more about our expectations than his capabilities. I may have been measuring him by the wrong metrics. Lauren looked up. It goes on, but that's the essence. That's something, Nathan said carefully. It's the closest my father gets to admitting he was wrong. Lauren refolded the letter. He also included a check for $5,000, made out to you as an apology. Nathan felt his eyebrows rise. He what? I'm not giving it to you, obviously. I already tore it up. But the gesture tells me he's genuinely troubled by how things went down. She leaned back in her chair. My parents aren't bad people, Nathan. They're just used to measuring life in very specific ways, and when something doesn't fit their framework, they don't quite know what to do with it. Most parents want security for their children. There's nothing wrong with that. There is when they forget to ask if their children are already secure. Lauren's fingers drummed against her desk. Anyway, I didn't call you here to rehash Friday night. I have a proposition for you, and I need you to hear me out before you say no. Nathan felt his guard go up. Okay. The Mercer account, Lauren began. You know it? Everyone in the accounting department knew the Mercer account. Mercer Industries was Richardson and Associates' largest client, a manufacturing conglomerate with facilities across the Midwest. Their account represented nearly 30% of the firm's annual revenue. I'm familiar with it, Nathan said cautiously. They're unhappy. Have been for about 6 months. Our senior team has been managing their account, but there's a disconnect. Mercer wants detailed financial analysis, scenario modeling, risk assessment. Basically, they want someone who can dive deep into their numbers and help them make strategic decisions. What they've been getting is high-level overview reports that look impressive but don't actually tell them anything useful. Nathan could see where this was heading, and he didn't like it. Lauren, just hear me out, she interrupted. I've been reviewing the work our team has produced for Mercer over the past year, and it's polished but shallow. Beautiful presentations with very little substance. Then I started going through some of the internal analysis you've done for other clients. The stuff that never makes it into formal presentations but exists in the background. Your work is different. You dig into the numbers, you find patterns. You ask questions that make people uncomfortable because the answers might require them to change. That's my job, Nathan said. Basic financial analysis. It's more than that, and you know it. Lauren pulled up a file on her computer and turned the screen toward him. This is the risk assessment you did for the Paulson merger last quarter. You identified 3 potential failure points that the senior team had completely missed. When I showed this to Richard Paulson, he almost killed the deal. Then he restructured it based on your recommendations, and it's now one of the most successful mergers we've facilitated in 5 years. Nathan remembered that analysis. He'd stayed late 3 nights running, building models and running scenarios, trying to understand why something about the deal felt off. He'd submitted his findings through the proper channels, never expecting them to reach anyone important. I didn't know Paulson ever saw that report, he admitted. Because Jim Hendricks took credit for it in the presentation, Lauren said, her voice tight with suppressed anger. He literally copied your analysis word for word and presented it as his own strategic insight. The revelation shouldn't have surprised Nathan. Office politics were predictable that way, but it still landed like a punch. Why are you telling me this? Because I want to put you on the Mercer account as the lead analyst. The words hung in the air between them. Nathan processed what she was saying, the implications spreading like ripples. The Mercer account has a senior team, he said slowly. Jim Hendricks has been managing it for 2 years. And he's about to lose it because Mercer is threatening to leave us for Kensington and Ross. They want depth. They want someone who actually understands their business model and can help them navigate some significant strategic decisions they're facing. Lauren closed her laptop. I think you're that person. Based on one risk assessment, based on 18 months of watching you work, based on the fact that when other analysts are trying to make numbers tell the story the client wants to hear, you're trying to tell the truth. Based on Friday night, when you could have walked away from an impossible situation but instead chose to stay and be honest. She met his eyes. I need someone on this account who won't just tell Mercer what they want to hear. I need someone who will tell them what they need to know. Nathan's mind raced through the obstacles. Jim Hendricks was a senior associate with 6 years at the firm and a reputation for landing big clients. He had an MBA from a prestigious school and connections throughout the industry. Nathan had a state school degree and 18 months of experience. Jim is going to fight this, Nathan said. Hard. Let me worry about Jim. And the rest of the senior team, they're going to see this as you playing favorites. They're going to see it as me trying to keep our biggest client from walking away. Lauren's voice was firm. I'm not asking you to be my friend, Nathan. I'm asking you to do your job at the level I know you're capable of. Everything else is noise. Nathan stood and walked to the window, looking out at the gray city. Rain streaked the glass, distorting the view. Below, people hurried along sidewalks, anonymous and purposeful. He thought about Sophie, about the foundation he was trying to build for her. This kind of opportunity could mean a raise, better benefits, maybe even the ability to move to a bigger apartment in a better school district. But it could also mean longer hours, more stress, more nights when he'd have to call Mrs. Chen and ask her to handle bedtime. It could mean missing Sophie's school concerts and soccer games. It could mean building a career at the expense of being present. What would the timeline look like, Sub? He asked, not turning around. Mercer wants a full financial review and strategic assessment within 6 weeks. That's the trial period. If you can deliver what they need and they're satisfied, the account is yours long term. 6 weeks of what kind of hours? Lauren was quiet for a moment. I'm not going to lie to you. It'll be intense. Late nights, probably some weekends, at least partially. Mercer has facilities in 3 states, so there might be some travel. Nathan turned back to face her. I have a daughter. I know. I'm the only parent she has. I can't just disappear for 6 weeks. I'm not asking you to disappear. I'm asking you to take on a challenging project that will require more than 9 to 5. Lauren stood, moving around her desk. Nathan, I wouldn't be offering you this if I didn't think you could handle it, but I'm also not going to pretend it won't require sacrifice. Sacrifice from Sophie, you mean? She's the one who'll eat dinner with a babysitter instead of her father. She's the one who'll go to bed without story time. Yes, Lauren said simply. That's the cost. Only you can decide if the potential gain is worth it. Nathan thought about Richard Blake's questions about providing for the future. He thought about Sophie's college fund, which currently had enough to cover maybe 1 semester at a state school. He thought about the leak in their bathroom ceiling that he kept patching instead of properly fixing because a real plumber was expensive. Can I think about it? He asked. You have until end of business today. I need to give Mercer an answer by tomorrow morning. Back at his desk, Nathan tried to focus on his regular work, but the morning's conversation kept replaying in his mind. Around him, the office operated in its usual rhythm. Keyboards clicked, phones rang. People moved between cubicles with purpose or the appearance of it. Heard you had a meeting with Lauren this morning. Nathan looked up to find Jim Hendricks leaning against his cubicle wall. Jim was everything Nathan wasn't: polished, confident, connected. His suits were tailored, his smile was strategic, and his handshake was designed to establish dominance. Just a check-in, Nathan said neutrally. Right. Jim's smile didn't waver, but his eyes were cold. Because directors usually close their office doors for routine check-ins. Is there something I can help you with, Jim? Just wanted to give you some friendly advice. Office politics can be tricky, especially for newer employees. Sometimes it's tempting to take shortcuts, to accept opportunities you're not really qualified for because someone in leadership takes a personal interest in your success. Jim's voice was casual, conversational, but the threat was clear. Those situations rarely end well. The person gets in over their head, fails publicly, and ends up worse off than if they just stayed in their lane. Nathan set down his pen and looked directly at Jim. I appreciate the concern. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're considering doing something really stupid. Jim straightened. The Mercer account is complex. It requires experience, relationships, nuanced understanding of manufacturing economics. It's not the kind of thing you learn by running some spreadsheet models and finding patterns. How did you know? See, Nathan started, then stopped. Of course Jim knew. Office gossip moved faster than email. Lauren's making a mistake, Jim continued. She's letting personal feelings cloud her professional judgment, and you're going to be the one who pays for it when you can't deliver what Mercer needs and they leave us anyway. Only this time, you'll have failed spectacularly instead of quietly, and that's the kind of thing that follows you. After Jim walked away, Nathan sat motionless at his desk. The smart play was obvious. Turn down the opportunity, avoid the conflict, stay in his lane like Jim had suggested. He had a good job with predictable hours that allowed him to be present for Sophie. Why risk that for the possibility of advancement? His phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Chen. Sophie's school called. She's running a slight fever. Nothing serious, but they want someone to pick her up. Nathan was already grabbing his coat before he finished reading the message. He stopped by Lauren's office on his way out. Sophie's sick. I need to go get her. Lauren looked up from her computer. Of course. Go. I hope she's okay. Just a fever. But I'll need to work from home the rest of the day. Make sure she's all right. Nathan, take whatever time you need. Family comes first. He paused at her door. Does it? In this kind of work, does family really come first? Lauren held his gaze. It should. Whether it does depends on the choices we make. The school nurse had Sophie waiting in her office, looking small and miserable with flushed cheeks and tired eyes. Nathan signed her out and carried her to the car, her head heavy against his shoulder. My throat hurts, Daddy, she mumbled. I know, sweetheart. We'll get you home and comfortable. At the apartment, Nathan settled Sophie on the couch with her favorite blanket and turned on a movie. He brought her water, checked her temperature, 100.3, elevated but not alarming, and called the pediatrician's advice line. The nurse suggested rest, fluids, and children's acetaminophen if the fever climbed higher. By early afternoon, Sophie was dozing on the couch, her breathing steady and even. Nathan set up his laptop at the kitchen table and tried to work, but his mind kept drifting to Lauren's offer. The Mercer account represented opportunity, real advancement, better pay, the kind of career trajectory that might eventually give Sophie the advantages Richard Blake had talked about. But it also represented time away. Evenings when he'd be in meetings instead of making dinner, weekends when he'd be traveling to manufacturing facilities instead of taking Sophie to the park, moments he'd never get back. His phone rang. His mother calling from Arizona where she and his father had retired 2 years ago. Hi, Mom. Nathan, sweetheart, I had the strangest feeling you might need to talk. Is everything all right? Despite everything, Nathan smiled. His mother's intuition had been unsettling his entire childhood and remained sharp across 2,000 miles. Sophie's homesick. Nothing serious, just a fever. Poor thing. Give her a kiss from Grandma. But that's not what's bothering you, is it? Nathan glanced at Sophie, still sleeping peacefully. He carried his phone to the bedroom and closed the door. I got offered a promotion. Sort of. A big project that could lead to advancement. That's wonderful, isn't it? It would mean longer hours, time away from Sophie, and there's a chance I could fail publicly and end up worse off than I am now. His mother was quiet for a moment. Do you remember when your father started his business? You were about 8. I remember him never being home. Yes. He missed your soccer games, your school concerts, bedtime almost every night. He was building something, and it required everything he had. She paused. Do you know what he told me years later after he'd sold the business and we'd retired? What? He said the business success was gratifying, but it wasn't worth missing your childhood. That if he could do it over, he'd find a different balance. His mother's voice was gentle. I'm not telling you what to decide, sweetheart. I'm just reminding you that there's more than one way to measure success, and not all of them show up on a paycheck. After they hung up, Nathan returned to the living room. Sophie had woken up and was watching her movie with heavy-lidded eyes. Daddy, will you sit with me? He settled on the couch beside her, and she immediately curled against him, her small body radiating heat from the fever. On the screen, animated characters were learning important lessons about friendship and courage. Nathan barely watched, too aware of his daughter's breathing, the weight of her trust. Daddy? Sophie's voice was drowsy. Yeah, sweetheart? I'm glad you came to get me. Something in Nathan's chest cracked open. Me too, baby. Me too. By 4 o'clock, Sophie's fever had broken, and she was demanding crackers and juice. Always a good sign. Nathan's deadline was approaching. End of business day. He needed to give Lauren an answer. He thought about Jim Hendrick's warning about staying in his lane. He thought about his mother's story about his father's regrets. He thought about Richard Blake's questions about providing for the future. Every voice offered different wisdom, different priorities, different versions of what a good life should look like. Then he looked at Sophie, color returning to her cheeks, humming along with her movie, completely secure in the knowledge that her father would be there whenever she needed him. Nathan picked up his phone and called Lauren. How's Sophie? She asked immediately. Better. Fever broke an hour ago. He took a breath. I've been thinking about your offer. And? I want to do it, the Mercer project, but I need to set some boundaries. I'm listening. I can work late too, maybe 3 nights a week, but I need to be home for dinner with Sophie the other nights, and I need to do bedtime with her every night I'm in town. Weekends, I can give you mornings if necessary, but afternoons are hers, and any travel needs at least a week's notice so I can arrange proper care. The line was quiet for long enough that Nathan wondered if he'd overplayed his hand. Those seem like reasonable boundaries, Lauren finally said. They're non-negotiable, Nathan clarified. If that doesn't work for Mercer's timeline, I understand, but I won't compromise on this. Nathan, I'm not asking you to choose between your career and your daughter. I'm asking you to take on a challenging project that will require careful time management and clear priorities. If you can deliver quality work within those boundaries, that's all that matters. And if I can't, then we'll deal with that if it happens. But I don't think it will. He could hear the smile in her voice. I'll let Mercer know we have our lead analyst. You start tomorrow, 9 a.m., my office. We'll go over everything. After hanging up, Nathan sat with his decision, testing it from different angles. It felt right and terrifying in equal measure. An opportunity that could change their trajectory, but also upset the careful balance they'd achieved. Daddy, I'm hungry, Sophie announced. He made her soup and toast, watching her eat with the focused intensity of a child who'd forgotten about food while feeling sick. She chattered about her movie, about the friend at school who'd shared crackers at snack time, about the picture she wanted to draw when she felt better. This was his foundation, not the job, not the career advancement, not the opportunity to prove himself to people like Richard Blake. This, Sophie's trust, her laughter, the ordinary miracle of being needed and choosing to show up. The Mercer project would be there tomorrow. Tonight, he was exactly where he needed to be. Later, after Sophie was asleep, Nathan sat at his kitchen table with a cup of coffee and opened his laptop. If he was going to do this, he needed to be smart about it. He created a detailed schedule, blocking out time for Sophie, time for work, time for the inevitable emergencies that would arise. He drafted an email to Mrs. Chen, asking about her availability for the coming weeks and offering to increase her rate. His phone buzzed with an email from Lauren. Mercer background files attached. No need to review tonight, but they're here when you're ready. Looking forward to working with you on this. Nathan opened the files, hundreds of pages of financial statements, operational reports, strategic assessments. It was daunting, the sheer volume of information he'd need to master in 6 weeks. But as he started reading, something familiar and comfortable settled over him. Numbers, patterns, stories hidden in data waiting to be discovered. He could do this. The question wasn't capability, it was cost. And he'd already decided that cost was worth paying, as long as he paid it himself and not by withdrawing from the account of Sophie's childhood. Around midnight, Nathan finally closed his laptop and checked on Sophie one more time. She was sleeping soundly, her fever completely gone, her breathing easy. He stood in her doorway for a long moment, watching her. "I'm going to try to give you more," he whispered into the darkness. "But I promise I'll never give you less of me. Deal?" Sophie, of course, didn't answer, but in the silence of her sleeping room, Nathan felt the weight of his promise settle into place alongside all the others he'd made her. He would keep this one too, no matter what it took. Tomorrow, he would walk into Lauren's office and begin the most challenging professional project of his career. But tonight, he was simply a father watching his daughter sleep, grateful for fevers that break and ordinary Mondays that remind you what matters most. The first 2 weeks on the Mercer account taught Nathan that ambition and exhaustion could coexist in ways he'd never imagined. He'd thought he understood hard work. Single parenthood was its own intensive course in time management and sacrifice. But this was different. This was choosing to add complexity to an already demanding life. And some mornings, Nathan woke up wondering if he'd made a catastrophic mistake. The Mercer files were dense with information that contradicted itself depending on which department had generated the report. Manufacturing claimed efficiency rates that procurement's numbers made impossible. Finance projected growth that operations couldn't support with current capacity. It was like trying to assemble a puzzle where the pieces came from 3 different boxes. Nathan spent his first week building models that mapped Mercer's actual performance against their reported performance, and the gaps were troubling. Not fraudulent, nothing that dramatic, but optimistic to the point of delusion. Someone at Mercer was either lying to themselves or hadn't looked closely at their own numbers in years. "This doesn't make sense," Nathan said during his second meeting with Lauren, spreading printouts across her desk. "They're reporting a 12% profit margin on their Ohio facility, but when you factor in actual labor costs, material waste, and equipment depreciation, they're barely breaking even. Someone's cooking the books, or they genuinely don't understand their own cost structure." Lauren studied the numbers, her expression growing more serious. "Jim's team has been accepting these reports at face value for 2 years. Jim's team has been accepting whatever numbers make Mercer look good because that's what keeps clients happy," Nathan said, then caught himself. "Sorry, that was unprofessional." "It was accurate." Lauren sat back in her chair. "This is exactly why I wanted you on this account. You're not interested in making people comfortable. You're interested in finding the truth. The truth is going to make them very uncomfortable. Better uncomfortable now than bankrupt later." She tapped one of his spreadsheets. "Can you build a presentation around this? Something that shows them the reality without making them feel attacked?" Nathan thought about that. Numbers could be weapons or tools depending on how you wielded them. The challenge was showing Mercer their vulnerabilities without making them defensive, helping them see the problems as solvable rather than catastrophic. "I'll need access to their facilities," he said. "Can't just work from reports. I need to see their actual operations, talk to people on the floor, understand where the disconnect is happening." "I'll set it up. Their main facility is in Toledo. 2 days? Next week?" Nathan pulled out his phone and checked his calendar. Sophie had a school field trip on Tuesday that he'd promised to chaperone, and Thursday was parent-teacher conferences. "Wednesday and Thursday," he said. "I'll fly out Tuesday night, be back Friday morning." Lauren made a note. "I'll have my assistant book everything. And Nathan, bring your A game. This is where we prove you can handle this account." That evening, Nathan sat Sophie down for a conversation he'd been dreading. She was at the kitchen table working on a math worksheet, her tongue sticking out slightly in concentration the way it always did when she was focused. "Hey, sweetheart, I need to talk to you about something." Sophie looked up, immediately wary. She'd developed a sixth sense for serious conversations. "Am I in trouble?" "No, nothing like that. But I need to go on a work trip next week, just for 2 nights. Mrs. Chen will stay here with you, and I'll call every night before bedtime." Sophie's face fell. 2 whole nights? Wednesday and Thursday. And I'll be back Friday morning, and then we'll have the whole weekend together. Maybe we can go to that new ice cream place you've been wanting to try. "But Thursday is my parent-teacher conference," Sophie said, her voice small. "You promised you'd go." Nathan felt his carefully constructed plan crumble. He'd looked at the calendar, verified the dates, somehow completely overlooked the one commitment that mattered most to his daughter. "You're right. I did promise." He pulled out his phone, already composing a message to Lauren in his head. "Let me see what I can do." "It's okay, Daddy," Sophie said, but her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Mrs. Chen can go with me?" The resignation in her voice was worse than anger would have been. This was a child learning not to expect too much, learning to lower her standards for what a parent's presence meant. Nathan had seen that look before, on his own face in childhood photographs, on the faces of other kids whose parents were too busy building futures to be present for the present. "No," he said firmly. "I'll be there. I promised, and I keep my promises to you, always." He texted Lauren, "Need to adjust Toledo trip. Can we do Tuesday, Wednesday instead? Have commitment?" "Thursday. I can't move." Her response came within minutes. "Checking with Mercer. Stand by." Sophie had returned to her math worksheet, but her posture had changed. Shoulders relaxed, the tension gone from her small frame. She trusted him to fix this, to keep his word. That trust was a weight Nathan carried everywhere. Lauren called instead of texting back. "Mercer can do Tuesday, Wednesday, but it's tight. Their CFO is only available Wednesday afternoon, and that meeting is critical." "I can make it work. Tuesday night travel, full day Wednesday, red-eye back Wednesday night. I'll be exhausted Thursday, but I'll be here." "Nathan, you're going to burn out at this pace." "Probably," he agreed, "but not this week. This week, I'm going to make it work." The weekend before the Toledo trip, Nathan took Sophie to the park despite the October chill in the air. They fed ducks at the pond, collected fallen leaves, and had a serious discussion about why squirrels were superior to chipmunks, a debate Sophie won through sheer force of passionate argument. On the walk home, she slipped her hand into his. "Daddy, are you happy at your new job?" The question surprised him. "Why do you ask?" "You seem tired a lot, and you're on your computer more at night." Nathan squeezed her hand gently. "The work is harder than before. But yeah, I'm happy with it. It's challenging in a good way." "Mrs. Patterson says challenges help us grow," Sophie offered. Mrs. Patterson was her first-grade teacher, a source of infinite wisdom in Sophie's worldview. "Mrs. Patterson is right. But, Daddy..." Sophie looked up at him with those two perceptive eyes. "It's okay if you don't want to grow right now. You're already pretty tall." Nathan laughed, the sound surprising him with its genuineness. "I appreciate that, sweetheart, but I think this kind of growing is important." "More important than me?" The question landed like a physical blow. Nathan stopped walking and knelt down to Sophie's eye level. "Listen to me carefully. Nothing is more important than you. Not my job, not money, not anything. You're the reason I work hard, but you're also the reason I come home. Do you understand that?" Sophie nodded solemnly. "I think so. If this job ever gets in the way of being your dad, I'll quit. I promise you that." "You don't have to quit, Daddy. I just wanted to make sure I was still first." "Always," Nathan said, pulling her into a hug. "Always first." Tuesday morning arrived with Nathan's alarm going off at 5. He'd packed the night before. One carry-on bag with 2 days of clothes and a laptop bag stuffed with Mercer files. He made Sophie pancakes for breakfast, helped her get ready for school, and tried not to think about the fact that he wouldn't see her again until Thursday. At the office, Jim Hendricks was waiting at Nathan's desk, his expression a mixture of smugness and false concern. "Heard you're heading to Toledo today," Jim said. "Big meeting with Mercer's executive team." "That's right." "Just wanted to wish you luck. These manufacturing guys can be tough. They don't suffer fools who don't understand their business." Jim leaned against the cubicle wall. "Of course, you've got your detailed spreadsheets. I'm sure those will be very impressive." Nathan looked up from his laptop. "Is there something specific you wanted, Jim, or did you just come by to undermine my confidence?" "Just offering friendly advice from someone who's been managing this account successfully for 2 years." "Successfully?" Nathan pulled up one of his analysis files. "Is that what you call a client who's threatening to leave because they don't trust our guidance anymore?" Jim's smile faltered. "They're not leaving. They're just exploring options. It's what smart businesses do. They're exploring options because you've been telling them what they want to hear instead of what they need to know. You've been accepting inflated performance numbers because it makes your job easier, and now they're facing strategic decisions based on faulty data." Careful, Nathan, Jim's voice dropped. You're still new here. You don't understand all the dynamics at play. I understand that our job is to help clients make informed decisions, not to validate their delusions. Nathan closed his laptop and stood. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a flight to catch. As he walked away, he heard Jim mutter something that sounded like, enjoy your crash and burn, but Nathan didn't turn around. He'd committed to this path, and second-guessing himself now wouldn't help anyone. The flight to Toledo was uneventful, giving Nathan time to review his presentation one more time. He'd built it around a simple premise. Mercer was a good company with solid fundamentals facing solvable problems, but solving them required honest assessment of current reality. No accusations, no blame, just clear-eyed analysis and actionable recommendations. His phone buzzed with a text from Sophie. Mrs. Chen is making me vegetables. Send help. He smiled and typed back, eat your vegetables. They make you strong. Strong enough to fight vegetables? Strong enough to appreciate them when you're older. That's what you always say. Because it's always true. Love you, sweetheart. Be good. Love you too, Daddy. Good luck with the numbers. The Mercer Industries facility in Toledo sprawled across 40 acres of industrial landscape. Nathan arrived Wednesday morning to find a complex of buildings that had clearly grown organically over decades. Original structures from the 1960s connected to modern additions by covered walkways and temporary-looking corridors that had become permanent. He was met in the lobby by David Chen, Mercer's CFO, a man in his 50s with the weary expression of someone who'd been fighting losing battles for too long. Mr. Cole, welcome to Toledo. They shook hands. I understand you've been doing some analysis of our operations. I have. I'm looking forward to discussing it with you and your team. David's smile was tight. We're looking forward to hearing what Richardson and Associates has to say. It's been a while since we felt like our account managers actually understood our business. The first stop was a tour of the manufacturing floor. David walked Nathan through the production process. Raw materials came in one end, finished components emerged from the other, destined for automotive, aerospace, and industrial clients across the country. The facility was loud, hot, and humming with activity that looked efficient until you knew what to look for. Nathan watched a team struggling with a machine that kept jamming, the line supervisor making adjustments that were clearly temporary fixes. He saw material waste being swept up and disposed of in quantities that seemed excessive. He noticed workers waiting for parts, time ticking by unproductively. How often does that machine jam? Nathan asked, pointing to the problematic equipment. David grimaced. Daily, sometimes multiple times. We've been meaning to replace it, but the capital expenditure is hard to justify when we're hitting our production targets. Are you, though, hitting targets? We deliver what our clients order, but at what efficiency rate? If that machine is jamming daily and workers are waiting for parts, you're paying for labor time that isn't producing value. David looked at him with something like relief. Finally, someone who sees it. Come on, let me show you the real problems. They spent the next 3 hours touring the facility, and with each department, the gap between reported performance and actual capability grew more apparent. The Ohio facility wasn't failing. It was succeeding in spite of systemic inefficiencies that were eating into margins everyone claimed were healthy. The afternoon meeting included Mercer's executive team, David, the COO, the head of operations, and the VP of strategic planning. They gathered in a conference room with windows overlooking the production floor, and Nathan could feel their skepticism like a physical force. He started his presentation with what they were doing right. Mercer had strong client relationships, quality products, and loyal workforce. Their brand was solid. Their market position was defensible. These were real strengths, and Nathan emphasized them. Then he showed them the numbers they'd been reporting versus the numbers their operations actually supported. Your Ohio facility reports a 12% profit margin, Nathan said, pulling up the first slide. But when we account for actual labor efficiency, material waste, equipment downtime, and the real cost of quality issues, your margin is closer to 3%. You're profitable, but barely, and you're one major disruption away from operating at a loss. The COO, a man named Marcus Webb, leaned forward. Those numbers don't account for our cost allocation methodology. We spread certain overhead across multiple facilities. I know, I've seen your allocation model. Nathan pulled up another slide. The problem is that your allocation methodology masks facility-specific problems. You're using the stronger performance of your Michigan plant to offset weaknesses here in Toledo, which makes your overall numbers look better but prevents you from addressing the root causes. David was nodding, but the others looked defensive. Nathan pressed on. Here's what I found on the floor this morning. Line 3 has a stamping machine that jams multiple times daily. Each jam costs you approximately 45 minutes of productive time when you factor in the jam itself, the reset, the quality checks after restart. That's costing you roughly $20,000 a month in lost productivity. We know about that machine, Marcus said, but replacing it costs $800,000. The ROI doesn't justify it. Nathan pulled up a new slide, a detailed ROI calculation he'd built the night before based on the tour. If you replace it, you eliminate $20,000 a month in lost productivity. That's $240,000 annually. Your payback period is just over 3 years, and the new equipment has a useful life of at least 15 years. After payback, you're generating nearly $250,000 in additional annual profit from that single change. The room went quiet. Nathan could see them processing, reevaluating assumptions they'd held for years. That's just one example, he continued. I found 7 similar opportunities in this facility alone. Equipment that should be replaced, processes that should be streamlined, material flows that should be redesigned. Collectively, these changes could improve your margin by 6 to 8 percentage points. That's the difference between barely profitable and genuinely healthy. The VP of Strategic Planning, a woman named Jennifer Park, spoke up. Why didn't Jim Hendricks identify any of this in 2 years of managing our account? Nathan chose his words carefully. My predecessor focused on high-level strategic guidance. I'm focused on operational reality, different approaches. Your approach tells us we've been making decisions based on incomplete information, Jennifer said, but her tone wasn't hostile, it was thoughtful. That's concerning. It should be, Nathan agreed, but it's also fixable. That's the good news. You don't have fundamental business model problems. You have operational inefficiencies that are solvable with capital investment and process improvement. The question is whether you're willing to make those investments. David looked at his colleagues. I've been saying this for 3 years, our numbers don't tell the whole story. Because you're our CFO, we thought you were being conservative, Marcus admitted. Protecting the budget. I'm protecting the company. There's a difference. The meeting ran 2 hours over schedule, the team diving into Nathan's analysis with the intensity of people who'd been waiting for permission to acknowledge problems they'd sensed but couldn't prove. By the time they finished, Nathan had commitments for facility visits to Michigan and Illinois, approval to dig deeper into their cost structures, and something that felt dangerously like respect. As the others filed out, David hung back. That was impressive, he said quietly. And brave. A lot of consultants would have given us a prettier picture. A prettier picture doesn't help you make better decisions. No, it doesn't. David extended his hand. I think this is the beginning of a productive relationship, Mr. Cole. Nathan caught a red-eye flight that left Toledo at 11:45, landing back home at 2 in the morning. He grabbed 3 hours of sleep, showered, and made it to Sophie's school by 8:30 for the parent-teacher conference. Mrs. Patterson was a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and the patient demeanor of someone who'd spent 40 years teaching first graders. She welcomed Nathan into her classroom, where student artwork covered every available wall surface. Thank you for coming, Mr. Cole. I know you had to travel for work. I wouldn't miss this, Nathan said, settling into a chair designed for someone half his size. Mrs. Patterson pulled out a folder with Sophie's work. Sophie is doing wonderfully. She's reading above grade level, her math skills are strong, and she's popular with her classmates. She's a natural leader, always including children who are left out, mediating conflicts, making sure everyone feels welcome. Nathan felt pride bloom in his chest. That sounds like Sophie. There's just one thing I wanted to discuss. Mrs. Patterson's expression grew more serious. Sophie has been talking a lot lately about your work, about how you're very busy with important projects, about how you're traveling and working late. Nathan's pride curdled into guilt. Has it been affecting her behavior? Not negatively exactly, but she's mentioned several times that she needs to be good, so you don't have to worry about her while you're working. That level of self-sufficiency in a 6-year-old concerns me. The words hit Nathan like a punch. Sophie was trying to make herself smaller, less demanding, to accommodate his increased workload. She was 6 years old and already learning to manage a parent's stress instead of being a child. "I didn't realize," Nathan said quietly. "I'm not criticizing your choices, Mr. Cole. I know single parenting is challenging, and providing for a child requires work. I just wanted you to be aware that Sophie is very attuned to your stress levels, and she's trying to help by being less of what she perceives as a burden." "She's not a burden. She's never been a burden." "I believe that's true, but does Sophie know it?" The question followed Nathan home, echoing through his exhausted mind as he picked Sophie up from school and took her for the promised ice cream. She chattered about her day, about the art project she'd finished, about the friend who'd shared cookies at lunch. She was bright and happy and trying so hard to be easy. That night, after bath time and story time, Nathan sat on the edge of Sophie's bed. "I want to tell you something important," he began. "Mrs. Patterson told me you've been worried about being good, so I don't have to worry about you while I'm working." Sophie's eyes went wide. "I'm sorry. Am I supposed to worry you?" "No, sweetheart. You're supposed to be 6. You're supposed to ask for things and need things, and sometimes be difficult because that's what kids do. You're not supposed to make yourself small, so I have an easier time." "But you're tired, Daddy. I can tell." "I am tired, that's true. But not because of you, never because of you." Nathan took her small hand in his. "You're the reason I work hard, but you're also the reason I come home. You're the best part of my day, every single day, even when you're being difficult, especially when you're being difficult, because that means you trust me enough to be yourself." Sophie considered this with the seriousness she brought to all important matters. "So I don't have to be extra good? You can be regular good, which includes sometimes being not so good, because that's normal and healthy. Can I be not so good about vegetables?" Nathan laughed. "Nice try. Vegetables are still non-negotiable." She giggled and burrowed under her covers. "I love you, Daddy." "I love you too, sweetheart. More than anything in the world." Friday morning, Nathan arrived at the office to find an email from David Chen waiting in his inbox. "Your analysis confirmed what I've suspected for years. The executive team is eager to move forward with your recommendations. We'd like to schedule monthly review meetings and quarterly strategic sessions. Congratulations on an impressive presentation." There was also an email from Lauren. "Mercer's singing your praises. Well done. See me when you get in." In Lauren's office, she was smiling in a way Nathan rarely saw, genuine, unguarded pleasure. "David Chen called me yesterday after your presentation. He said, and I quote, 'This is the kind of analysis we've needed for years. Where has this guy been hiding?' In accounting, apparently." "Not anymore. Mercer wants you as their dedicated analyst. They're increasing their contract with us by 40% to ensure they have priority access to your time." Lauren's smile widened. "That comes with a raise for you, by the way. 15%, effective immediately." Nathan processed the number. 15% meant he could finally fix the bathroom ceiling properly. Maybe even start looking at apartments in better school districts. "There's more," Lauren continued. "Jim Hendricks put in his 2 weeks' notice this morning. Apparently he's been interviewing with Kensington and Ross, and they made him an offer he couldn't refuse. He's leaving because of the Mercer account. He's leaving because he knows his approach doesn't work anymore, and he's smart enough to jump before he's pushed." Lauren leaned back in her chair. "Which means we have a senior associate position opening up. I'd like to offer it to you." The promotion Nathan had been chasing without realizing it was suddenly within reach. Senior associate meant real authority, better projects, a voice in firm decisions. It meant the kind of career advancement that could change his and Sophie's trajectory. It also meant more responsibility, longer hours, higher stakes. It meant choosing, every single day, how much to give to work and how much to reserve for the person who mattered most. "I need to think about it," Nathan said. Lauren nodded, unsurprised. "Take the weekend. We can talk Monday." That weekend, Nathan took Sophie to the zoo. They watched penguins, waddle, and sea lions perform and spent an hour at the petting zoo, where Sophie made friends with a particularly affectionate goat she named Gregory. They ate overpriced hot dogs and got lost trying to find the reptile house and laughed about it. On Sunday, they stayed in pajamas until noon, building elaborate block towers and having serious discussions about whether dinosaurs would like pizza. It was ordinary and perfect and exactly what both of them needed. That evening, Nathan made his decision. He called Lauren. "I'll take the senior associate position," he said, "but I'm keeping my boundaries. Sophie comes first. If that means I'm a different kind of senior associate than the firm is used to, then that's what you're getting." "I wouldn't expect anything else," Lauren said. "And Nathan, I think that might be exactly what this firm needs." Monday morning, Nathan walked into Richardson and Associates as a senior associate, feeling the weight of new responsibility and the certainty that he'd made the right choice. He'd found a way to grow without disappearing, to pursue ambition without abandoning presence. It wouldn't always be easy. There would be late nights and tough calls and moments when work and family pulled him in opposite directions. But he'd learned something crucial in the past month. Success wasn't about choosing between providing and being present. It was about fighting like hell to do both, and accepting that some days you'd do neither perfectly. As he settled at his desk, a real office now, with a door and a window, his phone buzzed with a text from Sophie. "Good luck on your first day as important person. Love you." Nathan smiled, typed back, "Love you too, sweetheart," and got to work, knowing that no matter how important his title became, his most important job would always be the one waiting for him at home. The promotion changed things in ways Nathan hadn't fully anticipated. His new office came with a nameplate that read, "Nathan Cole, Senior Associate," and a view of the city that reminded him daily how far he'd climbed in just 3 months. But it also came with expectations that extended beyond regular business hours and into territory that tested every boundary he'd tried to establish. The first real test came on a Thursday afternoon in late November, when Lauren knocked on his office door with an expression that Nathan had learned meant complicated news. "We have a situation," she said, closing the door behind her. "Mercer's CEO wants to meet tomorrow, in person. He's flying in specifically to discuss the restructuring recommendations you proposed." Nathan glanced at his calendar, though he already knew what Friday held. Sophie's school was having a Thanksgiving celebration, and he'd volunteered to help with the activities. He'd promised to be there. "What time is the meeting?" he asked, already knowing the answer wouldn't work in his favor. 10 in the morning? He's only in town for 4 hours before flying to their Michigan facility. Lauren sat down across from him. "I know you have something with Sophie tomorrow. Her school Thanksgiving celebration. I'm supposed to help run the craft stations. Can someone else cover for you? Another parent?" Nathan thought about Mrs. Chen, who'd already done so much. He thought about the other parents who had their own commitments, their own children depending on them. He thought about Sophie's face when he'd told her he'd be there, the way she'd immediately started telling everyone that her daddy was going to help make turkey handprints. "Probably," he admitted, "but I told her I'd be there." Lauren was quiet for a moment, her fingers drumming against the armrest of her chair. "I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. Mercer's CEO is notoriously hard to pin down. If he's making time to meet with you personally, it means he's serious about moving forward with the restructuring. But it also means he has concerns he wants addressed face to face. And if I'm not there? He'll take it as a sign that we're not fully committed to the account, that you're not fully committed." She met his eyes. "I'll support whatever you decide, Nathan, but I want you to understand what's at stake." After Lauren left, Nathan sat in his office staring at the city below. Cars moved along streets in orderly patterns. People went about their lives, making choices and living with consequences. Somewhere out there, Sophie was in her classroom, probably already excited about tomorrow, already imagining how the day would unfold. He picked up his phone and called Mrs. Chen. "Nathan, dear, is everything all right?" Her voice was warm with concern, the way it always was when he called during work hours. "I have a work situation tomorrow morning, an important meeting I can't reschedule." The words tasted like failure. "I know I promised Sophie I'd be at her school celebration, and I was wondering if you might be able to go in my place." Mrs. Chen was quiet for a beat too long. "Of course I can go. But Nathan, that child has been talking about you helping with the crafts all week. She's told everyone her father is coming." "I know." Nathan pressed his fingers against his eyes, fighting off a headache. "I know, and I feel terrible about it, but this meeting could determine the future of the biggest account I've ever managed." And Sophie's disappointment will determine how she learns to measure her worth against your work. Mrs. Chen's voice wasn't unkind, but it was firm. I'm not judging you, dear. I understand the pressure you're under. I'm simply reminding you that 6-year-olds don't understand important meetings. They only understand whether their parent shows up or doesn't. After hanging up, Nathan pulled up his email and started drafting a message to Lauren, requesting that the Mercer meeting be rescheduled. He got as far as the subject line before deleting it. Lauren had been clear. The CEO's schedule was inflexible. Asking to reschedule wasn't just inconvenient, it was potentially account ending. He tried another approach, emailing Mercer's assistant directly to see if an afternoon meeting was possible. The response came within 10 minutes. Mr. Harrison's schedule is fully committed. The 10 a.m. meeting is the only available slot before his flight. Nathan sat back in his chair, caught between two promises. One made to a client who represented professional advancement and financial security. One made to his daughter, who represented everything that actually mattered. His phone buzzed with a text from Sophie. Mrs. Patterson says tomorrow is going to be so fun. I can't wait for you to meet Gregory the turkey. He's not a real turkey. He's stuffed, but he's still nice. Nathan stared at the message, at his daughter's pure excitement transmitted through enthusiastic capitals and stream of consciousness grammar. He thought about typing back that plans had changed, that Daddy had to work, that Mrs. Chen would come instead. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. Instead, he texted Lauren, I need the meeting moved to afternoon or I can't attend. This is non-negotiable. Her response took longer this time. I'll try. No promises. 20 minutes later, Lauren appeared at his door again, this time with something like admiration in her expression. Mercer's CEO can do lunch tomorrow, 1 o'clock. You'll have to miss part of your afternoon, but you can make Sophie's celebration. She leaned against the doorframe. His assistant said he's never rescheduled a meeting for personal reasons before. Apparently, your insistence intrigued him. Nathan felt relief flood through him, followed immediately by anxiety. What if that intrigue turns negative during the meeting? Then we'll deal with it. But Nathan, what you just did, putting your boundary down and refusing to move it, that took guts. A lot of people in your position would have caved. A lot of people in my position don't have a 6-year-old waiting for them to help with turkey crafts. Lauren smiled. No, they don't. That evening, Nathan told Sophie about the slight change in plans. He'd be at her celebration, but would need to leave by 12:30 for an important work meeting. That's okay, Daddy, Sophie said, ever understanding. The crafts are in the morning anyway. You'll be there for the important part. All of it is important, sweetheart. I know, but the crafts are the most important. She grinned at him, gap-toothed and perfect. Can we practice making turkey handprints tonight so you know how to help the other kids? They spent the evening with washable paint and construction paper, creating a flock of multicolored turkeys that Sophie insisted on hanging throughout the apartment. By bedtime, Nathan's hands were stained orange and brown, and Sophie was so excited about the next day she could barely settle down for sleep. Daddy? She asked as he tucked her in. Yeah, sweetheart? I'm really glad you're coming tomorrow. Some kids don't have parents who come to stuff at school. The words pierced Nathan's heart. I'll always try to be there for your important stuff, Sophie. I promise. Even when you have important work stuff? Even then, because you're more important than any work stuff could ever be. Sophie seemed satisfied with this answer, closing her eyes with a small smile on her face. Nathan stood in her doorway for a long moment, watching her breathe, marveling at how someone so small could make him want to be so much better than he was. Friday morning arrived crisp and cold, the kind of November day that promised winter was coming. Nathan helped Sophie into her favorite purple dress, the one she saved for special occasions, and they drove to school together, Sophie chattering the entire way about which craft stations needed the most help and whether Mrs. Patterson would let them eat extra cookies. The classroom had been transformed into a Thanksgiving wonderland. Construction paper turkeys adorned every surface, paper pilgrim hats waited to be assembled, and the promised Gregory the turkey sat in a place of honor on Mrs. Patterson's desk, watching over the preparations with plastic button eyes. Mr. Cole, wonderful to see you, Mrs. Patterson greeted him warmly. Sophie has been so excited about you helping today. I'm happy to be here, Nathan said, and meant it completely. He was assigned to the handprint turkey station, along with two other parents, a mother named Jessica, whose twin boys were in Sophie's class, and a father named Marcus, who looked as uncertain about craft supervision as Nathan felt. Fair warning, Jessica said cheerfully as she set out paint bottles. This is going to get messy. I've done 3 of these celebrations, and someone always ends up with paint in their hair. As long as it's washable paint, Nathan said. Oh, honey, at this age, everything should be washable. Jessica laughed. Including the children. The celebration began with organized chaos. 23 first graders rotated through craft stations with varying degrees of enthusiasm and motor control. Nathan's station became immediately popular. There was something universally appealing about getting your hand covered in paint and pressing it onto paper. Sophie brought her best friend Emma to the station first, showing off her dad with obvious pride. This is my daddy. He's really good at numbers, but he's learning to be good at crafts too. I'm learning, Nathan confirmed, helping Emma position her paint-covered hand on the paper. The jury's still out on whether I'm actually good at it. You're doing great, Mr. Cole, Emma said seriously, studying her handprint turkey with critical eyes. Mine looks just like a turkey, sort of. If turkeys were blue. Blue turkeys are the best kind, Nathan assured her. For 2 hours, Nathan painted small hands, helped position paper carefully, listened to children's elaborate explanations of their turkeys' personalities, and tried not to get too much paint on his work clothes. It was chaotic and exhausting, and one of the best mornings he'd had in months. Sophie returned to his station 3 more times, not because she needed more turkeys, but because she wanted to be near him, to make sure he saw her friends, to share each small joy of the celebration. Each time, Nathan felt the rightness of his choice to be there, the importance of presence over prestige. At 12:15, he caught Mrs. Patterson's eye and pointed to his watch. She nodded understanding, and Nathan cleaned up his station, washing paint from his hands with the industrial-strength soap that barely made a dent in the staining. He found Sophie at the cookie table, frosting a sugar cookie shaped like a turkey with alarming amounts of orange icing. I have to head out now, sweetheart, he said, kneeling beside her chair. My meeting is at 1. Sophie's face fell for just a moment before she composed herself, and Nathan saw that learned resilience again, the instinct to hide disappointment to make things easier for him. But I had the best time this morning, he continued quickly. Your turkey handprints were definitely the best ones at our station, and I met all your friends, and they're all wonderful, and I'm so glad I got to be here. Me too, Daddy. Sophie threw her arms around his neck, not caring that her hands were sticky with frosting. You can go to your meeting now. I know it's important. Not as important as you, Nathan said, holding her tight. Never as important as you. The drive to the restaurant where he was meeting Mercer's CEO was a blur of traffic and anxiety. Nathan had changed his shirt in his office, keeping a spare specifically for situations like this, but he discovered paint under his fingernails that no amount of scrubbing had removed. He hoped Robert Harrison wouldn't notice, or would at least find it humanizing rather than unprofessional. The restaurant was the kind of place where the waiters wore better suits than most of the customers could afford. Nathan arrived 5 minutes early, was shown to a quiet corner table, and spent those minutes reviewing his notes one more time, trying to shift his brain from turkey crafts to corporate restructuring. Robert Harrison arrived exactly on time, a man in his mid-60s with silver hair and the commanding presence of someone used to being the most important person in any room. He shook Nathan's hand with a firm grip and sharp eyes that seemed to catalog everything in an instant. Nathan Cole, I've heard impressive things about your work. Thank you, sir. I appreciate you making time to meet. They ordered. Harrison apparently trusted Nathan to choose for him, a power move Nathan recognized but chose not to engage with, and then Harrison got straight to business. Your restructuring recommendations are aggressive, he began, pulling out a tablet with Nathan's presentation loaded. You're suggesting we essentially rebuild our cost structure from the ground up. Not rebuild, Nathan clarified. Realign. Your cost structure made sense 10 years ago when your product mix was different and your facilities were newer. But you've evolved, and your cost accounting hasn't kept pace. The misalignment is creating blind spots in your decision-making. Harrison studied him with those sharp eyes. My CFO has been saying something similar for years. Why should I listen to an outside consultant when I haven't listened to my own finance team. It was a test, Nathan realized. Harrison wanted to know if Nathan would defer to internal politics or speak truth. Because your CFO works for you, Nathan said evenly. He has to balance being right with being employed. I don't have that constraint. My job is to tell you what the numbers actually say, even if it's uncomfortable. And what do they say? They say you're a fundamentally strong company making decisions based on incomplete information. Your Ohio facility looks profitable on paper but barely breaks even in reality. Your growth projections assume operational efficiency you don't actually have. You're not in crisis, but you're vulnerable, and the next economic downturn could expose weaknesses you don't even know exist. The food arrived, but Harrison ignored it, leaning forward with intensity. If I implement your recommendations, I'm looking at significant capital expenditure, $8 million across 3 facilities. That's going to impact our dividend, our stock price, our investor confidence. In the short term, yes, Nathan agreed, but in the long term, you're building resilience. You're creating operational efficiency that makes you competitive regardless of market conditions, and you're giving your leadership team accurate information to make strategic decisions. Or I'm spending $8 million on consultant recommendations that may or may not pan out. That's always the risk. Nathan met Harrison's gaze steadily. But consider the alternative. Continuing with the status quo, making decisions based on faulty data, discovering 3 years from now that you've been systematically underestimating costs and overestimating margins. By then, the fix is more expensive and the damage to investor confidence is worse. Harrison finally picked up his fork, a signal that the interrogation portion of lunch was concluding. David speaks very highly of you, says you're the first consultant who's actually listened to what he's been trying to tell us. Your CFO is good at his job. He just needs backing from leadership to make the changes he knows are necessary. And you think I should give him that backing? I think you should give him the tools to show you why it's necessary. That's what my recommendations do. They create visibility into your actual operational performance. What you do with that information is up to you. They ate in comfortable silence for a few moments before Harrison spoke again, this time with a hint of amusement in his voice. My assistant told me you insisted we reschedule this meeting, said it was non-negotiable. Nathan felt his stomach tighten. I had a prior commitment I couldn't break. Must have been important. We don't usually accommodate scheduling requests, especially from consultants trying to win our business. This was another test, Nathan realized. Harrison wanted to see if Nathan would apologize, would diminish the commitment that had required the reschedule, would signal that work always came first. It was my daughter's school celebration, Nathan said simply. I'd promised I'd be there, and I keep my promises to her. Harrison's expression was unreadable. How old? 6, first grade. I have 3 grown children, Harrison said, his voice softer than before. You know what they remember from childhood? Not how successful I was or how big the company grew. They remember whether I showed up, whether I was present or just physically there. He set down his fork. I missed too many school celebrations, Nathan. Too many promises broken because of important meetings. The vulnerability in Harrison's voice surprised Nathan. This was a man who commanded a company with facilities in 6 states, who probably made more in a year than Nathan would in a lifetime, acknowledging regret about the same struggles Nathan faced daily. It's not easy, Nathan said quietly, balancing it all. No, it's not. But the fact that you're trying, that you'll push back on an important meeting to keep a promise to a 6-year-old, that tells me something about your character. Harrison leaned back in his chair. I'm going to approve your recommendations, all of them. $8 million in capital expenditure, restructured cost accounting, the whole package. Nathan felt shock ripple through him. Sir, thank you. I think you're making the right decision. I'm making the decision because your analysis is sound and because David trusts you, but I'm also making it because I trust people who have priorities beyond their careers. Harrison signaled for the check. I'll have my team coordinate with yours on implementation timeline. I want you personally overseeing the process. Of course, I'll make sure within your boundaries, Harrison interrupted. David mentioned you have strict parameters about work hours and travel. I respect that. We'll work within them. After Harrison left, Nathan sat alone at the table, processing what had just happened. He'd won the account, secured implementation approval for recommendations that would reshape Mercer's operations, and gained the respect of a CEO who could have easily dismissed him as just another consultant. And he'd done it without compromising his commitment to Sophie. His phone buzzed with a text from Lauren. Harrison's assistant just called. Whatever you did at lunch, it worked. He's all in. Well done. Nathan typed back, thanks, heading back to office now. But instead of immediately returning to work, he sat for a moment longer, thinking about Harrison's words about showing up, about presence versus physical proximity. He thought about the paint still faintly visible under his fingernails, evidence of a morning spent making turkey handprints instead of preparing for this meeting. That paint represented a choice, and Nathan was starting to understand that every choice created its own kind of success or failure. The afternoon at the office passed in a blur of emails and congratulatory messages from colleagues who'd heard about the Mercer approval. Lauren stopped by his office with a bottle of expensive scotch, for celebrating, when you have time, and a knowing smile. Harrison's assistant mentioned he appreciated your authenticity, she said. Apparently you made quite an impression. I just told him the truth about his company's finances, and about your daughter's school celebration. Lauren settled into the chair across from his desk. That took courage, Nathan. A lot of people would have invented a more impressive conflict. It wasn't a conflict, it was a commitment. Nathan looked out his window at the city, thinking about all the offices full of people making similar calculations about what mattered and what didn't. Harrison understood that, because he's lived long enough to have regrets about not understanding it sooner. Lauren's voice was thoughtful. You're building something different here, Nathan. A career that doesn't consume your life. I'm not sure I've seen that done successfully before. I'm not sure I'm doing it successfully. Most days I feel like I'm barely holding it together. That's what success looks like when you're actually trying to do it right. She stood to leave, then paused. There's something else. We've been approached about a potential new client. Tech startup, growing fast, looking for someone to help them build financial infrastructure. It's the kind of account that could establish you as more than just the Mercer guy. Nathan felt equal parts excitement and dread. Another major account meant more opportunity and more demands on his already stretched time. When do they want to meet? He asked. Next week, Tuesday afternoon. Their office is about 40 minutes from here. Nathan pulled up his calendar. Tuesday afternoon, Sophie had soccer practice, but Mrs. Chen had already agreed to take her. It was doable. Set it up, he said. I'll make it work. That evening, Nathan picked up Sophie from Mrs. Chen's apartment, where she'd gone after school. She was covered in more paint than she'd started the day with, having apparently spent the afternoon creating additional turkey artwork. Mrs. Chen says I'm very creative, Sophie announced proudly. She says creative people make messes, but that's okay because that's how you make beautiful things. Mrs. Chen is very wise, Nathan agreed, looking at the elderly woman with gratitude. She also says you had an important meeting and she hopes it went well. Nathan smiled. It went very well, actually. The people I met with liked my ideas. Of course they did, Sophie said with complete confidence. Your ideas are always good, Daddy. If only business were as simple as a 6-year-old's faith, Nathan thought. But there was something powerful in that uncomplicated belief, that certainty that her father was capable and good and worthy of success. They walked home together, Sophie's hand in his, chattering about her day, and Gregory the turkey, and the friend who'd cried when her handprint turkey got smudged. The November air was cold enough that Nathan could see Sophie's breath when she talked, small clouds of words rising into the darkening sky. At home, Nathan made dinner while Sophie did homework at the kitchen table. She was learning about patterns, filling in sequences of shapes with fierce concentration. Nathan stirred pasta sauce and helped her identify which shape came next, and the domestic rhythm of it settled something in his chest that the day's professional victories hadn't touched. After dinner and bath time and the nightly negotiation over how many stories constituted one more story, Nathan tucked Sophie into bed. Today was a really good day, she said sleepily. You came to my celebration and everyone got to meet you, and Mrs. Chen said I could make more turkeys anytime I want, and we had pasta for dinner, which is my favorite. It was a good day, Nathan agreed. Daddy? Sophie's eyes were already closing. Do you have any more important meetings next week? I have one on Tuesday, But Mrs. Chen is taking you to soccer practice. That's okay. As long as you keep coming to the really important stuff. She yawned. The stuff that's important to me. Always, sweetheart. That's a promise. Good, Sophie murmured, and then she was asleep, her breathing evening out into the gentle rhythm of childhood dreams. Nathan stood in her doorway, watching her sleep, thinking about promises made and kept, about turkey handprints and multi-million-dollar accounts, about Robert Harrison's regret and Sophie's paint-stained confidence. He'd won the Mercer account today. He'd secured approval for recommendations that would reshape a company's operations. He'd impressed a CEO who didn't impress easily. By any professional measure, it had been a triumphant day. But the real victory, Nathan knew, was simpler and more profound. He'd kept his promise to a 6-year-old. He'd shown up for turkey handprints. He'd chosen presence over prestige, at least for one morning, and somehow that choice had led to professional success rather than professional suicide. Maybe Lauren was right. Maybe there was a way to build a career without consuming a life. Maybe the key wasn't balance, that mythical state of perfect equilibrium, but rather the constant, exhausting, worthwhile effort of choosing what mattered most when everything demanded attention. Nathan's phone buzzed with an email from David Chen. Robert called me after your meeting, said you reminded him why he started the company in the first place, to build something worthwhile, not just something profitable. Looking forward to working with you on implementation. Nathan read the message twice, then set his phone aside and returned to Sophie's room one more time. She had shifted in her sleep, one arm flung over her head, her favorite stuffed elephant clutched in the other hand. She looked peaceful and secure and loved. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new choices, new demands on his time and energy. But tonight, Nathan was exactly where he needed to be. Home with his daughter, keeping promises, building a foundation that would outlast any corporate account or professional achievement. The pain under his fingernails would eventually wash away. But the memory of Sophie's pride when he'd shown up at her school, the weight of her trust when she'd said, "I knew you'd come," those would last forever. And in the end, that was the only kind of success that truly mattered. The tech startup meeting on Tuesday turned into something Nathan hadn't anticipated. The company, a software firm called Axiom Technologies, occupied a converted warehouse in the Arts District with exposed brick, standing desks, and a coffee bar that looked like it belonged in a boutique cafe. The CEO, a woman named Miranda Walsh, who couldn't have been older than 30, greeted Nathan with an energy that made him feel both ancient and oddly energized. "Nathan Cole, the miracle worker who fixed Mercer," she said, shaking his hand with enthusiasm. "David Chen gave us your name, said you're the only consultant he trusts to tell him the truth." "David's generous with his praise," Nathan said. "David's notoriously stingy with his praise, which is why we're talking to you." Miranda led him through the open office space where young developers worked with headphones on, oblivious to the world. "We're growing fast, doubled revenue in the past year, and our financial systems haven't kept pace. We need someone who can help us build infrastructure that scales." They spent 2 hours discussing Axiom's challenges, and Nathan found himself genuinely excited about the possibilities. This wasn't operational restructuring like Mercer. This was building something from the ground up, creating financial architecture for a company that could potentially become significant. "I want you on retainer," Miranda said as their meeting wrapped up. "Not full-time, but regular access. Maybe 2 days a week to start, with the understanding that we'll need more as we grow." Nathan did the mental calculation. 2 days a week at Axiom, 3 days managing Mercer implementation, plus his other responsibilities at Richardson and Associates. The schedule was tight, but potentially manageable. "I'd need to discuss it with my director," Nathan said carefully. "But I'm interested." "Good. Because I don't want just any consultant. I want someone who understands that building a company isn't just about profit margins. It's about sustainability, about creating something that lasts." Miranda walked him to the door. "David mentioned you have a daughter, that you're careful about work-life balance." "I try to be." "Don't just try. Succeed at it." Miranda's voice was surprisingly serious. "I've watched too many talented people burn out because they thought success meant sacrificing everything else. That's not the kind of company I'm building, and it's not the kind of consultant I want to work with." The conversation stayed with Nathan as he drove back to the office, as he updated Lauren on the meeting, as he picked up Sophie from soccer practice that evening. Miranda's words echoed Robert Harrison's regret about missed school celebrations, creating a pattern Nathan was beginning to recognize. Successful people looking back and wishing they'd made different choices about presence and priority. He didn't want to be one of those people looking back with regret, but he also didn't want to be someone who let opportunity pass by out of fear of commitment. That night, after Sophie was asleep, Nathan pulled out a notebook and did something he rarely allowed himself. He imagined a future beyond survival mode, not just paying bills and keeping his head above water, but actually building something substantial. With Mercer and potentially Axiom, he could double his income within a year. He could move to a better apartment, build a real college fund for Sophie, maybe even start saving for a house. But at what cost? The question haunted him as he stared at his calendar, trying to figure out how to fit 2 days a week at Axiom into a schedule already stretched thin. His phone rang. Lauren, calling at 10:30 at night, which was unusual. "Sorry for the late call," she said, "but I just got off the phone with Axiom's board. They want you, Nathan. They're willing to pay premium rates for your time." 2 days a week is a lot when I'm already managing Mercer. What if it wasn't? Lauren's voice carried an excitement Nathan had learned to recognize as dangerous. What if you could focus primarily on your major accounts, Mercer and Axiom, and we redistributed your other responsibilities? Lauren, I can't just abandon my other clients. Not abandon, delegate. Train up some of the junior associates to handle the routine work. You focus on the high-level strategic accounts. She paused. Nathan, you're operating at a level most senior associates take 10 years to reach. I want to promote you to principal. The word hung in the air like a challenge. Principal. It was the tier just below partner, the level where you had real authority and real stake in the firm's direction. It was the kind of position Nathan had never imagined reaching, certainly not in less than a year at the firm. That's a significant jump, Nathan said carefully. You've earned it. The Mercer account alone justifies the promotion. Adding Axiom makes it a no-brainer from a business perspective. Lauren's voice softened. But I'm not going to lie to you about what it means. Principals are expected to bring in business, manage major accounts, mentor junior staff. It's more responsibility, more visibility, more pressure. More hours, Nathan added. Potentially. Or more strategic use of hours. Lauren seemed to be choosing her words carefully. You've proven you can set boundaries and still deliver exceptional work. What if we built your principal role around that model? Quality over quantity, strategic impact over face time. Nathan thought about Sophie asleep down the hall, about the promises he'd made to her and to himself. He thought about Robert Harrison's regret and Miranda Walsh's warning. He thought about the foundation he was trying to build, not just financial, but the kind that would let Sophie look back on her childhood and remember a father who showed up. I need time to think about it, he said finally. Take until Monday. But Nathan, this opportunity won't wait forever. The firm is growing, and we need leaders who can grow with it. I think you could be one of those leaders. After hanging up, Nathan sat in the darkness of his living room, the weight of decision pressing down on him. Every choice had consequences that rippled outward in ways he couldn't fully predict. Accepting the promotion could secure Sophie's future in tangible ways. Better schools, more opportunities, financial stability that would outlast childhood. But it could also steal the present in service of that future, creating the same regrets he'd heard in Harrison's voice, the same warnings he'd heard from Miranda. The next morning, Nathan did something impulsive. Instead of dropping Sophie at school and heading straight to work, he called in late and took her to their favorite breakfast spot, a diner that served pancakes the size of dinner plates and had a jukebox that still played for quarters. This is a special Wednesday, Sophie announced, studying the menu she'd memorized months ago, but insisted on reading every time. We only do breakfast dates on weekends. Sometimes special things happen on Wednesdays too, Nathan said. They ordered chocolate chip pancakes for Sophie, coffee, and eggs for Nathan, and sat in comfortable silence until the food arrived. Sophie attacked her pancakes with the serious focus she brought to all important tasks, and Nathan found himself watching her, memorizing the moment. The way syrup got on her chin, the way she carefully cut each bite into precise squares, the way she hummed quietly while she ate, completely content. "Daddy, why are you looking at me funny?" Sophie asked, catching him staring. Just thinking about how much I love you. I love you too. She took another bite of pancakes. Are you sad about something? The question surprised him. Why would you think I'm sad? You have your thinking face on, the one you get when you're trying to make a decision about something important. Nathan smiled despite himself. When had his daughter become so perceptive? I have a big decision at work about whether to take on more responsibility. More responsibility means more work? Sometimes, but it also means more opportunities to do interesting things. Sophie considered this with the seriousness she brought to philosophical questions. Mrs. Patterson says opportunities are good, but we should always think about what we're trading for them. Mrs. Patterson is very wise. She is. Sophie scraped up the last bit of syrup with her fork. What would you be trading, Daddy? The question cut straight to the heart of Nathan's dilemma. What would he be trading? Time, certainly. Presents, potentially. The ability to have spontaneous Wednesday breakfast dates and make turkey handprints and be home for dinner most nights. Time with you, he admitted. Maybe. I don't know yet exactly what it would look like. Sophie set down her fork and looked at him with those two wise eyes. I don't want you to not take opportunities because of me. That would make me sad. Sophie, but I also don't want you to take opportunities that make you not be my daddy anymore. Like, if you're always working and we don't get to have breakfast or read stories or anything. Nathan reached across the table and took his daughter's small hand. I promise you, no matter what I decide, I will always be your daddy. Always. That's not negotiable. Okay. Sophie squeezed his hand. Then I think you should do what makes you happy, because when you're happy, I'm happy. The simple wisdom of it made Nathan's throat tight. Here he was, wrestling with complex decisions about career trajectory and work-life balance, and his 6-year-old daughter had cut through to the essential truth. Happiness wasn't about choosing between presence and provision, but about finding alignment between what you did and who you wanted to be. At the office, Nathan found an envelope on his desk. Inside was a handwritten note from Richard Blake, Lauren's father, on the same expensive stationery he'd used for his previous letter. Dear Nathan, it read, my daughter tells me you're being considered for principal. I wanted you to know that I've been following your career progress with interest since our unfortunate first meeting. You've proven that my initial assessment was not only wrong, but embarrassingly short-sighted. You measure success not by titles or income, but by integrity and commitment to your work, to your clients, and most importantly, to your daughter. That kind of character is rare and valuable. Whatever you decide about the promotion, know that you've earned the respect of someone who doesn't give it easily. Sincerely, Richard Blake. Nathan read the letter twice, surprised by the emotion it stirred. Richard Blake's approval shouldn't matter. The man had questioned Nathan's worth based on superficial metrics, had made him feel inadequate for building a stable life rather than a spectacular one. But somehow, having that same man acknowledge his mistake and recognize Nathan's actual value felt like vindication. Lauren appeared at his door. I see my father sent you a letter. How did you know? Because he sent me one too, apologizing for his behavior at that disastrous dinner and thanking me for introducing him to someone who challenged his assumptions about success. Lauren smiled. My father doesn't apologize often or easily. You made an impression. By refusing to pretend my daughter didn't exist? By refusing to be ashamed of your choices? Lauren settled into the chair across from his desk. Have you thought more about the principal position? I've thought about little else, Nathan admitted, but I keep coming back to the same question. Can I actually do this job at the level it requires while maintaining my boundaries around Sophie? I think the better question is whether we can build a firm culture where that's possible for everyone, not just you. Lauren leaned forward. Nathan, you're not the only person here struggling with work-life balance. You're just the only one who's been brave enough to actually enforce boundaries instead of just wishing they existed. If we promote you to principal with the explicit understanding that quality matters more than quantity, we set a precedent that could change how this entire firm operates. Or I could fail spectacularly and prove that boundaries and success are incompatible. That's possible, Lauren acknowledged, but I don't think it's likely. You've already proven you can deliver exceptional work within your constraints. The question is whether you're willing to bet on yourself at a bigger scale. Nathan thought about Robert Harrison approving $8 million in restructuring based partly on Nathan's willingness to prioritize his daughter's school celebration. He thought about Miranda Walsh wanting a consultant who understood that sustainability mattered more than short-term gains. He thought about Richard Blake's letter acknowledging that character counted for something. Maybe the world was ready for a different model. Or maybe Nathan was just desperate to believe it could be. "I want the promotion," he said finally, "but I want it on my terms. I'll manage Mercer and Axiom as primary accounts. I'll mentor junior associates. I'll bring in new business when opportunities align with my expertise. But I maintain my boundaries around Sophie's schedule, and I don't apologize for those boundaries to clients or colleagues." Lauren smiled. "Deal. Welcome to Principal Nathan. We'll announce it at the firm meeting Friday." The rest of the week passed in a blur of congratulations and logistics. Nathan met with the junior associates he'd be mentoring, reviewed the terms of his Axiom engagement, and coordinated with David Chen on Mercer implementation timeline. Through it all, he kept his evening routine with Sophie intact: dinner at 6, homework help, bath time, stories, bedtime by 8:30. Friday afternoon, the firm gathered for their monthly meeting. Lauren made the announcement of Nathan's promotion to principal, and the room erupted in applause. Nathan saw genuine happiness on most faces, though a few senior associates looked less than thrilled about someone leapfrogging their position in less than a year. After the meeting, colleagues stopped by his office with congratulations. The last visitor was unexpected: Patricia Blake, Lauren's mother, elegant in a cashmere coat and carrying what appeared to be a gift bag. "Mrs. Blake," Nathan said, surprised. "What are you doing here?" "Congratulating you, of course. Lauren mentioned your promotion, and I wanted to deliver this in person." She handed him the bag, which contained a leather portfolio with his initials embossed on it. "For your new position, every principal needs proper materials. This is incredibly generous. Thank you." Patricia settled into the chair across from his desk, studying him with the same assessing look she'd given him at that first dinner. "I owe you an apology, Nathan. That dinner was meant to meet the man Lauren was supposedly dating, but it became something uglier. My husband and I judging you against standards that had nothing to do with your actual character or capabilities. You were protecting your daughter. I understand that." "We were being snobs," Patricia corrected gently. "There's a difference between concern and judgment, and we crossed that line. Richard has been quite vocal about his regret, but I haven't properly expressed mine, so I'm doing it now. I'm sorry we made you feel like you had to defend your choices about how to build a life and raise your daughter." Nathan didn't know what to say. First Richard's letter, now this. The Blakes were systematically dismantling the assumptions they'd made about him, and he found their humility both touching and slightly overwhelming. "I appreciate that," he managed. "Truly. Lauren tells me you've been remarkable about maintaining boundaries around your daughter's needs," Patricia continued. "My own children are grown now, but I remember how hard it was to balance career and family. I didn't always get it right. None of us do. But the fact that you're trying, really trying, not just paying lip service to the idea, that's admirable." After Patricia left, Nathan sat alone in his office as the day wound down around him. Through the window, he could see the city transitioning from work mode to evening mode, people heading home to families and commitments and lives that existed beyond professional achievement. His phone buzzed with a text from Sophie. "Mrs. Chen says we're making cookies. I saved you some dough to taste. Don't be late." Nathan smiled, packed up his laptop, and headed out, catching Lauren in the hallway. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" "For taking a chance on me. For believing that my way of doing things could work." Lauren shook her head. "Nathan, you took the chance. I just gave you the opportunity. Everything else, the Mercer success, the Axiom contract, earning my father's respect, that was all you. With your support." "With my support," she agreed, "which you'll continue to have. Partners support each other, and that's what we are now, partners in building something better than what came before." The word settled over Nathan like a benediction. Partners. Not boss and employee, not mentor and mentee, but partners in creating a model of success that didn't demand the sacrifice of everything that made success worthwhile. That evening, Nathan and Sophie made cookies together, getting flour everywhere and eating probably too much raw dough. They watched a movie curled up on the couch, Sophie's head heavy against his shoulder, her breathing evening out as she dozed through the ending. Nathan carried her to bed, tucking her in gently. She stirred as he kissed her forehead. "Daddy?" "Yeah, sweetheart?" "Did you have a good day at work?" "I had a great day at work. I got a promotion." "That's good." Sophie's eyes were already closing again. "You deserve good things." "So do you, baby. So do you." After she fell asleep, Nathan stood in her doorway doing what he'd done countless times before, watching her breathe, marveling at her existence, feeling the weight and wonder of being responsible for this small person's well-being and happiness. 6 months ago, he'd been a junior accountant in a stable but unexceptional job, building a life designed around predictability and presence. Then Lauren had invited him to that disastrous dinner, setting in motion a chain of events that had challenged everything Nathan thought he knew about success and sacrifice. He'd been offered the Mercer account and chosen to keep his boundaries around Sophie's needs. He'd been challenged by Robert Harrison and chosen honesty over accommodation. He'd been given opportunities that could have pulled him away from his daughter, and he'd found ways to pursue them without abandoning his promises to her. Now he stood on the edge of a future that looked different from anything he'd imagined. Principal at a respected firm, managing accounts that could define his career, earning respect from people like Richard Blake, who'd initially dismissed him as inadequate. But more important than any professional achievement was the sleeping child down the hall, who knew without question that her father would show up for her, would keep his promises, would choose her first when it mattered most. Nathan's phone buzzed one more time, a message from Lauren with a photo attached. It showed the conference room whiteboard from earlier, where someone had written in large letters, "Congratulations, Principal Cole." Below it, in smaller writing, proof that doing it right is possible. Nathan saved the photo, then added his own message to Lauren. "Thank you for believing it before I did." Her response came immediately. "Thank you for proving it's true." In the quiet of his apartment, with Sophie sleeping peacefully and tomorrow full of possibility, Nathan allowed himself to feel something he rarely permitted: pride. Not in his title or his salary or his impressive client list, but in the fact that he'd found a way to build success without destroying what mattered most. He'd been a single father who accepted a dinner invitation that turned into an unexpected complication. He'd navigated office politics and client demands and the constant pressure to choose between provision and presence. He'd set boundaries that others called limitations and proven they could be strengths. The journey wasn't over. There would be more challenges, more difficult choices, more moments when work and family pulled in opposite directions. But Nathan had learned something crucial. Success wasn't about perfect balance or having it all. It was about knowing what mattered most and building your life around that knowledge, even when the world told you to make different choices. Sophie stirred in her sleep, murmuring something about cookies and turkeys before settling back into dreams. Nathan smiled, pulled her door mostly closed, and walked to his own room feeling the kind of tired that came from a day well lived rather than merely survived. Tomorrow he'd start his first full day as principal. He'd have meetings with Axiom and check-ins with Mercer and responsibilities that would test his abilities and his boundaries. But tonight, he was simply a father who'd kept his promises, a man who'd chosen presence without abandoning ambition, a person building a foundation that would last long after titles and promotions faded into memory. In the darkness of his room, Nathan thought about all the people who'd shaped this journey: Lauren, who'd believed in him; David Chen, who'd trusted him; Robert Harrison, who'd respected him; Richard and Patricia Blake, who'd learned from him; Miranda Walsh, who'd challenged him; and Sophie, who'd loved him unconditionally through it all. He thought about Jim Hendricks, who'd chosen a different path and was probably succeeding in his own way at Kensington and Ross. He thought about all the other parents juggling work and family, making impossible choices, and living with the consequences. He thought about the man he'd been 6 months ago, cautious, protective of his narrow but manageable life, afraid to reach for more because reaching meant risking what he already had. That man was gone, replaced by someone who understood that risk and reward existed in more than financial terms, that the biggest danger wasn't failing professionally, but succeeding at the cost of the relationships that gave success meaning. Nathan's last thought before sleep was of Sophie's voice that morning. "When you're happy, I'm happy. Such simple wisdom from such a small person, cutting through all his complex analysis to reach the essential truth. He was happy. Not perfectly, not constantly, but genuinely. He was building something worthwhile. Not just a career, but a life. Not just providing for his daughter, but being present with her. Not just achieving success, but defining it on his own terms. And in the morning, he'd wake up and do it all again, navigating the beautiful, exhausting, worthwhile challenge of being exactly who he'd promised Sophie he would be. A father who showed up, a man who kept his word, a person who chose love over achievement without having to sacrifice either. The foundation he'd been building for 3 years was solid now, not because it was perfect, but because it was built on truth, about his priorities, his boundaries, his definition of what made a life successful. Sophie was right. When he was happy, she was happy. And Nathan Cole, newly promoted principal and eternally devoted single father, was discovering that happiness wasn't about having everything, but about knowing what mattered most and building your entire life around that knowledge. In the end, that was the only success story worth telling. Not about climbing corporate ladders or impressing important people, but about being present for the small moments that created a childhood, about keeping promises to a 6-year-old who believed her daddy could do anything, about proving that doing it right was possible if you were brave enough to define right for yourself. Nathan fell asleep with a smile on his face, ready for whatever tomorrow brought, secure in the knowledge that no matter what challenges came, he'd face them as the man he'd chosen to be, Sophie's father first and everything else second. And that was exactly how it should be.